Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're back with some Between the Headlines. And then at the end of the show, I'm going to show you the new project that's going on at the Honey Milk Ranch. I started trying to build some stairs. Think I got this. So we'll check that out at the end of the show today. But let's jump right into what's going on. Good morning. Good morning, Betty, Kim, Stacy, Max. Truth hurts. Now, apparently the Democrats are looking at a new bill designed to control the internet. Now, they've talked about this over the years, and this legislation is actually being recycled. Apparently, this was something that they tried to put forth before. Of course, it faced severe backlash, but they're not giving up. And now, a couple of Democrat senators are pushing forward this digital control. Now, we're going to read this bill or part of it today, see what's in store. But essentially what's going on here is that this just isn't a Democrat pushed thing. They want to frame it as such, but really it's our government in total. This is how they will silence all of us. They are framing this as control over online media giants is the way they're framing this legislation, but ultimately this will affect free speech on the internet, which is you and me. And it will become harder and harder to get messages like the ones that we deliver on this channel out to the general public. This will become a thing about publishing and your ability or disability to publish something that can reach a wide audience. This is the control that they are wanting to place on the internet. If you haven't figured it out by now, the internet has become a place where anybody can reach a wide audience. Now, the algorithms have put the boot in the back of the neck of most people who have had a voice. And the algorithms have also throttled the controlled opposition or the people that they want to push forward and allow to go forward because they know that it will help derail whatever message that person may be pushing forward. A prime example of that, of course, is Alex Jones and many other. And of course, the Q community that was allowed to be throttled and channels got huge. The Nobody Died community of truthers, which became huge during the era of Handy Sook, because those are the kind of narratives that the controllers can capitalize on. They can say, look at those crazy people. They don't think anyone really died. They don't think anyone died on Blind 11. They're crazy. And even though some of what those people are saying is true, when you throttle that to the forefront of the messaging, then you get it. You have a problem, don't you? Because it discredits the entire movement. Now, we're dealing right now with an identity crisis in the truth community. It's all over the place. And this was due to the wake of what happened at the Crapper Hole and the whole Q psyop. And now people are just scrambling. They don't know what to think anymore. You have topics like the shape of the earth being pushed forward also as a divisive topic, even though you know what my belief system is about that. Again, throttling that to the forefront of any messaging is going to derail. Let me give you an example that might be a little bit more real for you guys to understand. As Christians, we know that a lot of people are going to go to hell, right? But if you were to go out into the general public and all you said was, you're all going to hell, what kind of message will that send? That's not going to get anybody saved to the kingdom, isn't it? So, even though it's true, it's still not going to save people to the kingdom. And this is what the internet has done in the algorithms. They've pushed to the forefront these divisive topics that can't be resolved without fierce debate, fierce fighting, and in the end, a lot of it really doesn't matter. And this is what I have always told you guys about the particularly the nobody died crowd. Okay. When you say that, when you push that, you are essentially letting the controllers off the hook. Because if nobody died, then what's the problem? They're covered under the NDAA Act, and that falls under propaganda if they lied about people dying. So you're essentially working for the dark side when you do that, when you push that narrative forward. And you alienate your family and friends who start to believe that you're crazy because in the nobody died crowd, they don't think anybody ever dies. And that's an extreme viewpoint that is completely untrue. We know that the devil requires sacrifice, so of course people die. Now, what is going on with this legislation? Now, make no mistake, the online media giants and the government are working hand in hand to get this done. They're not opposed to one another, which is what they want you to believe. They're working together. They want complete control over what is broadcast over the internet. Why? Because they're spending a lot of time and money on programming. And they want to maintain their effectiveness in their programming to deceive the masses. They don't want any counter messaging because that ends up affecting their bottom dollar, their bottom line. Now, let's read this article and then we'll get into the language of this actual bill. The legislative proposal would establish a so-called Federal Digital Platform Commission to regulate online services, including those that offer content primarily generated by algorithmic processes. Two Democratic senators reintroduced legislation on Thursday that would establish a new federal agency to oversee digital platforms and artificial intelligence providers. So essentially, the government is going to control the artificial intelligence, the algorithms. A move that comes as congressional lawmakers have spoken more forcefully in recent months about the need to regulate generative AI technologies and social media services. So the way it'll work is there'll be rules set upon places like YouTube and Google. They'll tell them what they can and can't allow on the platform, which will directly affect channels like ours. That's how all this is going to go down. And then YouTube will say, oh, not our fault. The government forced us. But secretly, they're all working together to control the messaging. Because your freedom of speech, your speech is powerful. And they know that. The only way for them to counter your speech is to pretend like they're trying to keep you safe. Now let's keep reading here. The bill introduced by Senators Michael Bennet of Colorado and Peter Welch of Vermont would create a federal digital platform commission to have more direct oversight and authority over AI products and online platforms. According to a summary of the proposal, the legislation would create a 5-member commission empowered to hold hearings, pursue investigations, conduct research, establish rules of the road for digital platforms to promote competition and protect consumers. So what you're going to see a lot of here as we go through this bill is you're going to see a lot of fluff that seems to promote protecting the consumer, but buried in the language will be also oppressive rules against free speech. What they're doing here is they're making artificial intelligence the scapegoat. And this is why when you hear people like Elon Musk saying that AI needs to be controlled, it sounds like a good thing. But then the next logical question is, who will control it? And of course, their answer is government, because government controls everything, doesn't it? Now, let's get into this bill, and I'm pretty much just going to read parts of this that jumped out at me under this findings and sense of Congress section. Now, this is alarming. Some of this language in here is just flat out alarming. How they frame all this and how they talk about it. A lot of patronizing of American citizens, making it seem like, oh, we're just going to even the playing field. Everything's going to be fair. But really, it's about taking away your free speech. The United States takes pride in the success of its technology sector, which leads the world in innovation and dynamism, provides valuable services to the people of the United States, supports thousands of good-paying jobs in the U.S. In recent years, a few digital platforms have benefited from the combination of economies of scale, network effects, and unique characteristics of the digital marketplace to achieve vast power over the economy, society, and democracy of the United States. Okay, so what this is really saying here is that they lost control of the messaging and the narrative due to the internet, is what they're essentially saying here. The last time Congress enacted legislation to meaningfully regulate the technology or telecommunications sector was the Telecommunications Act of 1996, years before many of today's largest digital platforms ever existed. So, translation, we've done this before and we have the right to do it again. Digital platforms remain largely unregulated and are left to write their own rules without meaningful democratic input or accountability. So that's code for we've lost control and we want it back. Now they talk about the unregulated policies and operations of some of the most powerful digital platforms have at times produced demonstrable harm, including undercutting small businesses. Undercutting small businesses, that's kind of like what happened during the pandemic. Abetting the collapse of trusted local journalism. Local journalism didn't collapse because of the internet. Local journalism collapsed because conglomerates began going around and buying up all of local news sources, right? Enabling addiction and other harms to mental health of the people of the United States, especially minors. So they make it sound here like they're going to get rid of all the things that cause addiction online, like gambling and PORN. They're making it sound like they're going to get rid of that. But are they really? Of course they're not. They're never going to get rid of that off the internet. Disseminating disinformation and hate speech. So this is what's going to affect us. Because who gets to decide what's disinformation and hate speech? Anything that's against their narrative, they're going to say is disinformation, even though they've been wrong. And even though without an opposing debate, nobody would ever have even realized that they were wrong unless we were thinking for ourselves and sharing and spreading information. So this bill is full of problems. Undermining privacy and monetizing the personal data of individuals in the United States without their informed consent. So here's the pat on the back for the regular consumer to pretend as though they're now going to protect us from this when they could have done something about this all along without this bill. In some cases, radicalizing individuals to violence. Well, have you ever been and watched any of these action films lately? Have you watched some of these documentaries, some of these war films that are basically available online, produced by Hollywood and all over the internet? People pay to go to movies to watch this. What are they going to regulate that to? Because if the argument is that you can radicalize somebody to violence by what they're seeing and hearing, well, I think that the slam dunk would be any Hollywood film, which depicts people that have been radicalized to violence, right? Which I don't believe in that myth anyway. I think if you got a screw loose, you're going to do whatever you're going to do anyways. You don't need to be watching it and be programmed with it to actually be radicalized to violence. Let's keep reading here. Perpetuating discriminatory treatment of communities of color and underserved populations. So this is another bone that they're throwing. They're pretending as though this is a huge problem when it's actually not. The development of increasingly powerful algorithmic processes for communication, research, content generation, and decision making, such as generative artificial intelligence, threatens to magnify the harms identified in paragraph 6 without mechanisms for proper oversight and regulation to protect the public interest. The failure of the United States government to establish appropriate regulations for digital platforms cedes to foreign competitors the historic role played by the United States in setting reasonable rules of the road and technical standards for emerging technologies. Throughout the history of the United States, Congress has often responded to the emergence of powerful and complex new sectors of the economy by empowering sector-specific expert federal regulators. So here come the federal regulators. So what do you guys think about this? I mean, now this thing goes on for pages and pages. I'm not going to read any more of it. What are your thoughts on the control of the internet? I think most people can agree this is a horrible idea. Horrible. I mean, yes, there are certain general things that should not be allowed, obviously, things that involve children. But if you're on a site and it's all adults, we should be able to have a debate. It should be a free debate about most things. And yes, in extreme circumstances, very extreme, I would say that some things might need to be taken care of. But people like us simply sitting around having a debate and maybe not believing a lot of what happened in history does not qualify as something extreme that needs to be taken off the internet. So it's a slippery slope, right? Because as soon as you crack open that door of regulation, it can go too far real quick. And next thing you know, we're living in 1984, and there's a ministry of truth. Now, let's get into some more of these other stories, because literally last week we were talking about Lyme disease. Well, let's first talk about Elon Musk. I want to make sure that we get into that first, because Elon Musk's Neurolink said that it has FDA approval for human trials. Now, this guy is probably the biggest gaslighter on the planet. I don't know how he has so many Christians deceived, so many right-leaning people deceived, because essentially what this guy is working on is a way to interface your brain. There's nothing biblical or safe or great about that. Technology is already far too intrusive. You've got, people spending way too much time on the internet, way too much time connected to their surroundings. And now they want to add another layer, which is hooking you directly up to the matrix. Let's play a little bit of this and see what this says here.
Musk's brain implant company Neurolink said on Thursday it had been given a green light from the US FDA to kickstart its first-in-human clinical study. It's a critical milestone for Neurolink after earlier struggles to gain approval.
We're confident that it is possible to restore full-body functionality.
On at least 4 occasions since 2019, Musk has said his medical device company would begin human trials for a brain implant to treat severe conditions such as paralysis and blindness. Yet the company only sought Food and Drug Administration approval in early 2022, and the agency rejected the application.
Now, I'm going to interject here because many of you will remember the discussion that we had about bioelectronics. Remember that? Remember Moncef Slaoui, the guy who headed up Warp Speed for Donald Trump, the guy he hired to do this? We looked into his background. He was a New Ager. Probably the person that came up with the logo for Warp Speed, which is a New Age Reiki symbol that stands for male and female and transcendence and connecting you to other places. Remember that? Remember we found footage of him talking about his New Age belief systems and integrating that into bioelectronics, hacking the vagus nerve near your neck. Literally the bite on the neck, like a vampire. Hacking the vagus nerve. And now we have Elon Musk doing essentially the same thing with the brain implant instead. instead of hacking the nerve. This is bioelectronics. It is the goal. And why and how did Trump hire that guy who is into this to head up warp speed? And how did that fit in to the two fangs that everybody got poked with, which was the entire purpose of warp speed? These are questions that we need to be asking, because there's much more to this than meets the eye. Now, Elon Musk says a lot of good things, but then he does a lot of questionable things, like dresses up as the devil for Halloween, and Neurolink, and so many other things. So don't get caught up in some of these people, because they're just controlled opposition. Neuralink, Elon Musk's brain implant company, said Thursday evening that it has regulatory approval to conduct the first clinical trials of its experiment device in humans. Now, we're at a fever pitch right now. I know another channel had just covered another guy who had a Bluetooth inserted into his brain, which allowed him to walk. He was a paraplegic. What is happening here? Why all this news coming out at the same time about the same thing? It's because the enemy wishes to try to mix steel with watery clay, just as the book of Daniel says in the last days. Now, the two shall not cleave on a wide scale, but it doesn't mean that they're going to try to attempt this and to try to offer something to humanity that gets them to worship the beast in the image of the beast. Now, approval by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration will mark a milestone for the company, which has been developing a device surgically inserted into the brain by a robot and capable of decoding brain activity and linking it to computers. Oh, what could go wrong with that? Up until now, the company has conducted research only in animals. We're excited to share that we've received FDA approval to launch our first in-human clinical study. Now, of course, they frame this as something that's going to help people, right? And now you know why they parade out people who don't have limbs or people who are in wheelchairs. They've been used to push forward the need or the solution, which is this kind of stuff. And these will probably likely be the first people they experiment on. Paraplegics, people that don't have a lot of hope in ever regaining full function. They'll play on that and they'll make them promises and they'll say, if you get involved in this clinical trial, at some point in your life, you could be able to walk again with real legs, stem cells, and Neuralink. The FDA doesn't typically confirm approvals for human clinical trials, but offered a statement on Friday. The FDA acknowledges and understands that Neuralink has announced that its investigational device exemption for its implant R1 robot was approved by the FDA and that it may now begin conducting human trials. Musk has prematurely touted regulatory approval in the past. What is Neuralink? Founded in 2016, privately held firm with operations in Fremont, California. With Musk's backing, Neuralink has brought extraordinary resources and investor attention to a field known as brain-computer interface. And Moncef Slaoui called it bioelectronics. Scientists and engineers are developing electronic implants that would decode brain activity communicated to computers. Such technology, which has been in the works for decades, has the potential to restore function to people with paralysis and debilitating conditions. Already, companies like BlackRock, Neurotech, and Synchron have implanted devices in people for clinical trials. 42 people have had brain-computer implants. 42. Such devices have enabled feats that once belonged to the realm of science fiction. A paralyzed man fist-bumping President Barack Obama with a robotic hand. Think about this for a second. This is mockery. Remember what Jesus did when he came to the planet? He said, get up and walk. he healed people. Well, Elon Musk wants to tell people to get up and walk. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Now, I'm not going to read this whole article, but I'll put links to all this as I always do. Check in with you guys really quickly, and then we'll get into Lyme disease, because just last week we were talking about Lyme disease, weren't we? And I was telling you about a documentary. The name of the documentary about Lyme disease is called The Silent Epidemic. And the Holy Spirit told me to watch it. And we got a little emotional because it's a very, very sad documentary about a girl who caught Lyme disease, chronic Lyme disease. And it was about how she was treated by the pharmaceutical industrial complex and the CDC. They were gaslighting the family, calling their house, telling them to be quiet, and they made them feel as though their condition was all in their head. They even recommended psychological counseling and medications for paranoia and things. Well, lo and behold, always follow the money. Because just after we talked about that, now on May 25th, remember, oftentimes we bring up stuff and then a few days later, a week later, it shows up in the mainstream news. Now they're talking about a Lyme disease vaccine. May 25th, 2023, because they're going to capitalize on something they already know the reason why it's happening. Could have even been the reason why the documentary came out and the timing of it all. And of course, they're going to blame it all on climate change. It's our fault because we let the planet warm up, but that's why ticks are running around with freaking alien spirals, viruses, and bacteria climbing around inside of them. That's why. It's because of global warming. Unbelievable. As climate change shortens winters, warm weather loving ticks stay active for longer. Meanwhile, construction developments break up ecosystems, and the deer and mice that act as reservoirs for the Lyme-causing bacteria romp through the suburbs unchecked. Now, unfortunately, we live in a time where, I had a couple people were a little bit upset because I live out here and, the wildlife has to be managed. Now, even more than ever, because there are bioweapon carrying fleas and ticks and mice. This is the reality of where we live in the times that we're living in. 100 years ago, yes, let nature be nature, exist in it and around it, in unison with it. And even then, 100 years ago, you had to carry a gun with you out in the forest because you could get attacked by a bear. You have to shoot the bear if the bear is charging you. Otherwise, you die. And so this is what had to happen on the frontier in the Wild West. We forget sometimes that we actually live in a world with wild beasts that can kill you, And so if we're living in reality, we have to understand that these things carry a disease. And I didn't know this, but apparently mice carry ticks, as you just heard me read. And so if you've got a mice infestation, then you're going to have ticks along with it. They're going to be in and around you. I had a neighbor come by. He hunts, great guy. But I was sitting there talking to him, and he does a lot of hunting, actually. He loves to hunt deer. And in his truck, there's ticks crawling on his dashboard. I'm like, that's a tick. So just even being around the deer and stuff and hunting and cleaning them and, having your feeder and them walking around your property, you're going to have lots of ticks. Now, I'm not saying this to scare you. You just need to be prepared. I had one tick crawl on me so far because I always check when I come inside. I spray my lavender water on. I do my diligence and they don't crawl on me. So that means I'm doing it right. I tuck my socks in. As long as you take precautions, you're going to be fine. But if you're in denial and you think, oh, I'm going to live in nature and let nature be nature, and I'm not going to do anything, I'm not going to keep the grass down to keep the ticks down, I'm not going to try to control the rodents, then you're going to fall victim to the bioweapons that the enemy has produced. And that's just a little friendly advice for those of you thinking about starting a homestead, because it's the truth. So let's keep reading about this new Lyme vaccine. More than 475,000 people are diagnosed with or treated for Lyme disease each year. You guys, this is the new epidemic. Real symptoms, not the fake stuff that we just went through. Once contained to a small section of the Northeast, U.S., and Midwest, Lyme disease cases have skyrocketed in those regions, and tick-borne diseases are proliferating in western states. The rash, fever, and fatigue that typically accompany Lyme disease usually clear up after a few weeks of oral antibiotic treatment, but if left untreated for long enough, the disease can spread to the heart, joints, nervous system, causing pain, difficulty thinking for more than 6 months after treatment. Now, they minimize this here, what I just read. It's minimized. Once you see the documentary, you'll know what I'm talking about. These corkscrew, they literally look like a wine bottle opener. That's exactly what they look like. They literally infest the nervous system. They drill in like little worms into your spinal column, into your brain, into the heart. This is a serious disease. And I'm skeptical as to whether or not even this treatment, this antibiotic treatment, oral treatment, is even really killing the whole thing. Because in the documentary, they showed what these spirochetes do. Spirochete, I don't know how they pronounce it. But basically, the antibiotic kills the top of the spirochete, but the part that's drilled down into the tissue remains alive, like a root. And then it grows back. So you might feel better for a little bit. And then when the thing grows back, it comes back, and it probably comes back more ferociously and fiercely than the first time. Now, why am I telling you all this? Well, because the Bible says, my people perish because of lack of knowledge. So I'm sharing with you what I've learned so that you can be aware of it. You don't have to be afraid, just be aware. And once you're aware of these things, you can protect yourself, can't you? You don't need to freak out about it or get down about it. Just protect yourself. Now, in the documentary, they actually realized that you need intravenous antibiotics to really kill this thing. And I think that should be the standard treatment. But they're never, ever going to admit that to you, because that would cost a lot of money. Insurance companies don't want to cover it. So many of these people were left to suffer. To give you an example, there is a family, the family I was telling you about the girl in the wheelchair whose whole body was infested with this stuff, killed her brainstem outright. There was zero activity in her brainstem. She couldn't even get out of bed. Her father had to carry her on her back. Well, they were able to do a fundraiser. They raised a couple $100,000. But by that time, she was so infested that no antibiotics would help her anymore. Whereas if they would have done that up front, she would have probably been okay. And this is the tragedy of our medical system. The people that really need the help aren't getting it. And we live we live in a society where people go to the doctor for quote unquote preventative care, and all the doctors get their money because you're going in every 3 months, every 6 months. They're writing you prescriptions for medicines you probably don't need. And they're all making money. The pharmaceutical companies are making money. And then they say, oh, that's because it's preventative care, right? But here's the problem. People might criticize me because I don't carry health insurance, but I haven't been to a doctor in, 18 years. Maybe 15 years. Let's say 15 years. I've been to a doctor or dentist. So, am I actually helping the healthcare system, or am I making it worse? I argue that I'm helping the healthcare system because I haven't gone in for quote unquote preventative care. I choose to try to be a healthy person And I know that that rule doesn't apply to everyone. I know some people have had lifelong illnesses, but that we should reserve the healthcare system for those people who really need it. This whole preventative care thing, I think, is a sham. I think what that does is it gets people in the routine of going to the doctor so they can make their money when you really don't probably need to go. Now, there are certain things like women care. I understand that as well. You should probably go in and get checked every so often. I'm 50, so I should probably go in and get my exam that they tell you to get. But, if there isn't a problem, makes you wonder if you really need to go. I don't know how people got by for all the thousands of years up to this point. I know a lot of people died young, but, who knows? So that's my personal opinion. I feel like this pharmaceutical industrial complex is a beast. It's a beast. And, and if you do go in for preventative care, doctors should not be getting full pop for that, for an office visit. The kinds of reimbursements that they're getting for that. And of course, all the pharmaceutical medicines are way overpriced as well. So now they've got a vaccine for Lyme disease. It says there is no pharmacological way to prevent Lyme disease from taking hold after a tick bite, at least not in humans. Dogs have been getting vaccinated against Lyme for 30 years. That could change very soon. A vaccine by Pfizer and Valneva is in stage 3 clinical trials. Could be ready for the next tick season. Moderna has 2 vaccine candidates in the works, and a novel prophylaxis shot developed by researchers at the University of Massachusetts could give seasonal protection even for people who have a hard time mounting an immune response. 25 years ago, a vaccine called Lymerex. Now, all of this was mentioned in the documentary. They talked about Lymerex. Came out 25 years ago, was shown to be 76% effective at preventing Lyme disease. But in 2002, vaccine manufacturer SmithKline Beecham pulled it from the market due to poor sales. Wow. The company faced a class action lawsuit alleging that Lymerex caused arthritis in vaccine recipients. Wow. So it caused the very arthritis that Lyme's disease does. Investigations concluded that the vaccine wasn't to blame, but demand for the vaccine had already plummeted. For decades, other companies kept out of the market, fearing the same outcome. But Lyme is no longer considered a rare disease, and increasingly greater portions of the U.S. population live in areas where Lyme is endemic. Mothers are fed up with checking their children for ticks every day. It affects people's quality of life. If they can't enjoy their backyard, if they can't go out and walk in the woods to pick blueberries, have their children play in the yard without worrying about them kicking a ball off into the edge of the yard. Why can't they just say that, wow, you get bit by a tick and you go in and get intravenous antibiotics? Why can't they just do that? And then that prevents the chronic aspect of this, because the spirit sheet doesn't have the time to infest the body because it's killed off immediately. As soon as that fever hits and the child or person starts to get sick, this is what they should do. I don't understand the problem here, but of course they got to make money off of this, right? So they've come up with a vaccine. Wow. Now let's get into some of these other stories. The Bud Light effect is still in effect. And now North Face is taking fire. North Face makes cold weather gear for hiking, camping, and stuff like this. So first we had Bud Light, then we had Target, now it's North Face. And it's standing by its pride participation despite right-wing criticism after it featured a drag queen in an online ad. Yeah, because when we pull up North Face, that's what we want to see, a drag queen in an online ad, right? The ad for North Face's Summer of Pride campaign features Patagonia. Oh boy. And debuted in Instagram Wednesday. I'm real life that, the queen says in a video. I'm here with the North Face to help you come out in nature with us. Wow. So here we go. It's all going down, you guys. It's all going down. I can't even believe what's happening in our society. Huh. So we'll see what happens to North Face. Now, the destabilization of American life is in full effect through the controlled demolition of the lower and middle class. And that is what's driving homelessness, which of course is further eroding quality of life that we all used to remember. And now that the controllers have dumbed us down into accepting homelessness as normal in supposedly the wealthiest society in the world, now that they've already used those people and dumbed us all down, they're now turning on the very homeless people that they used to destabilize our cities. This is out of The Guardian, and Portland has decided to take a hard turn on homelessness. The stick over the carrot. Now remember, these were places that were handing out needles and all this other stuff and promoting the homelessness, and now all of a sudden Jesse Burke stepped out of the lobby of the Society Hotel and into an unusual scene. The sprawling tent encampments that once lined the sidewalks of Portland's old town were mostly gone. This is what should be normal, said Burke, who bought and renovated the 132-year-old Mariners building in 2013 and transformed it into a chic hotel on 3rd Avenue. Burke owes this to a palpable and controversial shift in liberal Portland, a city that has long opted for mostly hands-off policy to the camps that had come to dominate the hotels surrounding blocks. Now, at the urging of residents like Burke, the city is clearing camps, sometimes daily, and planning to encourage unhoused people to relocate to centralized communities. The only policies I've seen are compassion on top of compassion, Burke said. Anyone who works with these populations knows there are people who respond to carrots and people who respond to sticks. Now, none of this is the real issue. The real issue, 90% of the time, not for every homeless person, is that there is no affordable housing. Or wages are too low for someone to afford to live. I think most of the people in these homeless communities, if they knew they could go to a job for 30 to 40 hours a week and knew that they could afford rent, a car, some way to get around, somewhere clean with a toilet and a hot shower, I can't imagine anybody would not want to do that. And if they don't want to do that, or they're unable to do that, if they're disabled, obviously they should get some help if they're truly disabled. But if they choose just not to want to live in these areas, then they should have an area set aside for them to live where they can live off the land outside of the city. I don't see why this is rocket science for these bureaucrats, but they're trying to make this like some complicated thing. It's used as a political football to divide us right and left, isn't it? Because this has always been, the homelessness issue has always been a right-left issue that people like to fight over and talk about. Now, we got a couple new animal attacks. Let's get into this. This one's kind of funny, actually. A fierce beast is attacking Florida residents. What is it? A domestic cat with an attitude. Now, this is serious business. This cat has sent a few people to the hospital, emergency rooms. Alerts for dangerous animals on the loose are commonplace in Florida, a state that leads the nation for escapes of wild creatures ranging from bears, lions, and monkeys to snakes and tigers. But a stalking beast currently terrifying residents of Suwannee County after sending 2 people to the emergency room in separate attacks turns out to be a domestic cat with an attitude that has evaded capture for almost a week now. This is no joke. I remember growing up in Stockton, California, and I've come across at least 2 crazy cats. We all know who they are. Crazy cats. Now, this isn't common for cats. Cats are normally pretty docile creatures. But I've had personal run-ins with a few cats that have chased me, literally chased me down the street. Or they climb up your leg and try to scratch your face. I mean, some cats are crazy. Apparently this cat is. Deputies from the county sheriff's office have laid traps for the fractious feline, but have so far failed to make an arrest. Instead, the office's animal control unit is advising the public to be mindful of the feral cat or any other animals in the area that present signs of rabies. During 2 separate incidents, residents exercising and walking on 174th Street were attacked by a feral cat. Both residents received injuries serious enough that they had to seek medical treatment. Wow. Now, they're not saying that these cats have rabies. I don't know if they haven't tested these cats yet. But this is actually kind of funny. A crazy cat running around, scratching people, and attacking them. Anyway, what else we have? Well, this is a story out of Cambodia. Farmer fell into his own crocodile enclosure and was devoured alive. 40 crocodiles. Can you imagine? Look at that crocodile pit. Probably wasn't much left of this guy. 72. Luan Nam fell into the crocodile enclosure in Siam Reap while trying to use a stick to move a crocodile that had just laid eggs. The reptile grabbed the stick and pulled him in. Why didn't he let go? Wow. Unbelievable. What else do we have? Let's see here. Oh, here's a story on free energy. And they want you to believe that all of a sudden they've figured this out, right? And really, they've known this all along. Scientists harvest electricity from thin air using strange material. Isn't that what Nikola Tesla did? They've even got the lightning, just like Nikola Tesla's technology that he used, and some of the pictures that he showed, and some of the experiments that he did. An intriguing new research. Scientists are continuing to explore the finding that the electrical currents surrounding us can be harvested using a material made from living organisms. Wow. They built upon prior research in a new paper in the journal Advanced Materials into what they call the air gen effect. The basic idea is growing conductive nanofilms out of bacteria that can pull small amounts of electricity from the water vapor in the air. The air contains an enormous amount of electricity. Think of a cloud, which is nothing more than a mass of water droplets. Each of those droplets contains a charge, and when conditions are right, the cloud can produce a lightning bolt. We don't know how to reliably capture electricity from lightning. What we've done is to create a human-built small-scale cloud that produces electricity for us predictably and continuously so we can harvest it. Oh, wow. Interesting. Now, what else do we have here? AOC gets heckled in a New York City town hall meeting. Let's take a look at this.
Don't you touch me. Don't touch me.
Well, let's see what these people are all upset about here. Let's read this article here. She was shouted down and faced a partially hostile crowd during Friday town hall, where some participants were upset about the Democrat socialist legislators' positions on immigration, Ukraine funding, and the debt limit. Now, these are all non-issues, okay? Why are they leading with this? The true problem in New York that everybody should be screaming about is the end of natural gas and heating oil, which will enslave the people of New York and cause their energy prices to skyrocket. That's the thing they should be concerned about. All these other issues are just a smokescreen. Immigration. Well, that's going to happen regardless. Ukraine, that's going to happen regardless. That's part of the agenda. The debt limit, that's a non-issue. That's just a scare tactic to further enslave us, thinking we're in debt. These people make their own money. They print it. Speaking to constituents in Corona, Queens, so this is the site of where we did all this research on the World's Fair of 1939 and 1946, I think it was. And this is where they were. This is crazy. We'll watch a little bit more of this.
Get your hands up. Where are you on the migrant issue? You're absent. American citizen.
You see how they're controlling the narrative? They're bringing up topics of debate that they never will solve. Will never, and secretly behind the scenes, they're slowly marching us toward the surveillance state and the electric kingdom, while we're all fighting about immigration and all this stuff that they never intend to solve on either side. Now, some can argue Trump tried to build a wall. Well, all that was a big money-making scheme for him and his buddies to pay them a bunch of money to build a wall. Walls don't keep people in, policies do. And nothing was done to change the policies. There were no executive orders made to the states to enforce their policies, which draw people from across the border, right? Nothing was done about that to force California not to have sanctuary cities and be giving out driver's licenses and employing people. What they should have done is made it a fine or a felony to employ an illegal person. And then people stop employing them, and then there's no reason to come here. If you can't get a driver's license and you can't work, then you won't come. None of that was done. Instead, we got a visual. Which was the wall, which never got finished. They never intended to finish it, but all of his buddies made a bunch of money building the wall. Before any wall should be built, the policies of America and maintaining our borders should be enforced across any border state because it's national security. Okay, so you can't tell states what to do. If it's national security, you can. And I've seen other executive orders that are much more far-reaching than making it illegal to have a sanctuary city or hire an illegal in the United States based on national security. This is just common sense stuff, you guys. But you'll notice that a lot of these border states, even the Republican ones, are still giving out freebies to illegals, causing them to come here.
You're throwing better in this country. Where are you? You're a piece of shit. You're a piece of
So, what does this do? This makes us look crazy, right? We're right-leaning. And this guy makes it sound like we're a bunch of crazies, doesn't it? That's the whole purpose of it. Democrats win because she's the one that's calm and collected, and all the issues that he's bringing up are issues that are never going to get solved. They're just going to continue to force you to vote one way or the other based on your feelings about it. And that's what this is really all about. Okay, look at the crazy Republican. See how this works? It's gaslighting, you guys. I mean, I wouldn't even like be shocked if she didn't hire that guy to come do that, to give herself legitimacy.
The president has come out saying that he also believes that he has this authority. What he has also said is that he is not sure if he is able to implement the authority in time for the June 5th deadline. And so that is where we see kind of this impasse. I still believe, first of all, that we should start to implement it anyway because we should eliminate the debt limit in the United States.
So she's got a pre-canned response, and notice now that for the people on the left, they're cheering her. Wow, she handled that really well. Yeah, she stayed calm. She's not crazy. See how this works? It's all a clown show. It's all a clown show. Now, let's see. Do I have any Oh, okay. So this is a huge story here. This is out of the AP. I can't say what this is. You can see on your screen. We're going to call it the crapper hole. That's what we've been calling it. But look at what's happened. This is a travesty. Let me check in with you guys. We're going to cover this last story before we get back to the Honey Milk Ranch. Good morning and welcome, everybody. Welcome to Between the Headlines, as we try to make sense of this crazy world that makes absolutely no sense and how we're getting played and gaslighted on every turn. It's good to understand this stuff, even if you're not into politics, because you're going to see this manifest in your family and friends. You need to understand why they've been tricked and why they're feeling the way they're feeling about certain things. And that's why we have to help you guys understand this. Now, let's watch this here. Let's take a look. Because what have we been saying for the last 2 years? I've been telling you that if Trump was real, he would have started a fund for the people who got wrapped up in this mess. Instead of making money for himself with these NFT trading cards and for his legal defense fund, instead of raising millions for himself, he could have started a fund for these people. But instead, that has never happened. We've got nothing from him on that, not a dime. So what happened? Well, Tucker Carlson decided he was going to do it. He was going to start a fund. So he did. He started a website, got the attention some of these people needed, and he called them political prisoners. Now, I'm being careful with my speech here because I don't want to get this, flagged or whatever. And guess what happened? They're now saying that the money that was raised cannot be used by these people. Literally, they're telling people who can fundraise and who can't. Let me read part of this. Tucker Carlson promoted a website where supporters could donate money to some of these people, whom the site called political prisoners. The Justice Department now wants this person who got the money to give up the more than $25,000 he raised. He could have used this for his legal defense. How are these people supposed to pay for a lawyer? I thought, is there some law that you have the right to some kind of legal defense in America? That's what I thought. Wow. So the government they're burying these guys. They're burying them. Literally burying them. Now, I'm not saying all these people are great people, but a lot got wrapped up in this. They're making an example out of them. They're not even allowed to raise their own money. Now, that's about all I'm going to read about this, because this is, listen, what does it say down here? I just saw Donald Trump's name. Oh, okay. They're just saying what the history of it was or whatever. Again, I'll put links to all this. Now, let's get back to the Honey Milk Ranch. Now, Ben's been off to other projects. He's a guy who helped me, kind of finish up a lot of the stuff. So I thought I might tackle some of this stuff on my own, what's left to do. Now, believe it or not, I stay busy most of the day preparing for shows and researching, editing. Every single day we're dedicated to this, but I also try to dedicate now a few hours to these ranch projects. So I decided to tackle the deck stairs, because I need some stairs on the deck. It's kind of high off the ground, hard to kind of climb up onto the deck unless you're in the house. And so I wanted to show you that, and I also wanted to show you my attempt at being a bird whisperer. Okay, let's pull this up here. All right, you guys. I was sawing away on my stair project, as you can see here, making a lot of noise and getting some good progress here. Made some footings this morning after the show. Cut these angles. I'm waiting for some brackets from Home Depot, and I'm actually going to try to build my own stairs. I got some stain that matches that red oak that was cut from my property. It's actually a cedar stain that my contractor picked out. I think it looks really good on these face boards, because the face boards are all milled from the property. The top of the deck we did with pressure treated lumber, because I didn't want to run into rotting boards and having to change out boards anytime soon. So just the accent pieces, which is like the vertical piers here, that's all red oak stuff that is not going to get too wet and these face boards that I can easily pull off and replace at some point if I need to. But these are the stairs, and I'm going to put a set over here. That's a pretty thick board, but it's all I pretty much had, and that's a bit of a span, so I want to make sure it was strong. When the brackets come in and it goes together, it'll look more put together. But anyway, as I'm out here, I look up in the tree, and there's a black-capped chickadee, like right behind me, messing around in the trees. What they do, it's really weird. They run around these trees, around the base of the tree here, in like a spiral, which is really interesting, right? And they walk around the tree. They're like anti-gravity almost, and they walk around the tree in a spiral, and I don't know what they're looking for, bugs or whatever. But anyway, he was here a second ago. I was hoping to try to coax him in with some oats. Now, I don't have any seeds on me on hand, so I thought maybe these oats will work. Apparently these birds are so friendly that they will literally eat out of your hand if you train them. They're the friendliest of all birds, apparently, which is very intriguing to me, because that means something. It always does. I'll wait for him to come back out. If he comes back out, I've got this handful of oats, and I just heard him tweet. Their call goes like this. I've gotten a little bit better at this call, but apparently they're still not convinced. And I'll just have to be patient. I got a couple more cuts. This was the tree he was at, so we will see if he comes back. I'll be ready. Now, there's also a really cool bird called a whippoorwill, and they come out like at night. So like 10 o'clock last night, I was just about to go to bed, and I heard the whippoorwill in the tree. And they're apparently some birds are named by the call that they make. So the whippoorwill actually makes a whippoorwill call. It goes whippoorwill, whippoorwill, like that, or something like that. And they come out at night. Now you can go on to YouTube and find images of this whippoorwill and video of it, and they're a really interesting bird. They're kind of a medium-sized bird, like brownish. They're very well camouflaged. They build their nests on the ground, and apparently they're threatened, so they're kind of rare. So it's kind of a treat to have these birds here in the trees on the property, a whippoorwill. So now I've identified two kinds of birds, a whippoorwill and the black-crested, the other bird that I just mentioned.
Well,
black-crested chickadee.
The stringer, they're all done. I'm going to do what's called a closed stringer. So you don't put cuts in the board. You actually just attach hardware inside the inside right here. So I've got all the hardware, and then there's a hanger joist piece of metal that goes on these here to hang it right on the edge there. The next part is just going to be rise and run, which is basically have to figure out how many steps are going to go in there, right? So I'll plan that out as well. But I think it's a good start. I think we are doing okay for a person that's never made stairs before. The hard part is cutting through this oak. This stuff, oh boy, Noah would have been burnt out if he had to build the ark out of this stuff. This oak is like sawing through metal, and my electric saw here was smoking coming out of here, probably getting close to burning it up. But it did do the job, did all the cuts you saw here.
I actually had to get a new blade for this circular saw. I think the blade was dull and it was like a little bit bent, so that was part of the problem, so that should solve it. But it's still going strong.
And as soon as the hardware comes, I'll be cooking with gas. But I'll keep an eye out for these chickadees. In fact, maybe I can spot one on a tree. They're pretty cool. They just walk around the tree. Being a little shy. I got plenty of oats to feed them, so I'm kicking myself because I had some leftover trail mix. It was like old and stale, and I just kept holding on to it, and then I just threw it away a couple weeks ago. They would have loved that. Some vanilla granola trail mix. But it is what it is. But I do not see my black cap chickadee anymore. They must live close by here, because I see them often and I hear them every day in the morning. Wakes me up. Anyway, we'll keep an eye out, you guys. There's Mr. Wolf. I think that's the same spider.
I think that's the wolf spider. Look at the size of that thing.
Wolf spider. Not very afraid, are they? Whoa. Here he goes. He obviously knows I'm not going to hurt him. Probably kind of hard to see. The light's pretty low right now. What a beautiful time of the evening here. Anyway, no chickadee. Guess he decided he didn't want my oats. Funny creatures. There they are. Gosh, there's 3 of them. See if they'll eat some of this oats. Can't wait to put these stairs in, you guys. Like chomping at the bit to get these stairs up.
Part of the fun of all this is just identifying all the different animals, birds and reptiles and, you know, bugs. I mean, it's almost like there's infinite amounts of wildlife out here. And every day you see something new. Now, the chickadees were playing a little game with me. They had come out when I wasn't looking, and I caught them out of the corner of my eye on this tree here. And then they ran back in here, and they were in the limbs just looking at me. So they were playing a little game with me. You know, obviously they don't want to be on camera. But what an amazing gift. Now, I also got some footage of a real hornet. They've been snooping around. I don't know why. I had not really seen them much until the last couple weeks. And all of a sudden, these giant hornets came out. And it reminded me of when we were in France. Many of you will remember one of the first videos we did when I was in France. We found hornets inside the fireplace, in Mark's fireplace. And we were comparing it to the size of a matchstick. And this thing was massive. Many of you will remember Mark holding the hornet in his hand. Well, isn't it crazy how life comes full circle? And these hornets showed up.
Got our first murder hornet sighting. Look at that thing. Had to take him out.
This thing was massive. It was literally the same size as the ones that we saw at Mark's property. Now, you don't want these things to get established in your house because they are very dangerous. Some people are allergic to them. You could die if you get stung. You know, there's all kinds of reasons why you don't want them on your property. And there are plenty of other places in the forest for them to hide. They don't need to be hiding or building on your house, in your house. Now, where I draw the line is I wouldn't go out into the forest and try to kill them. That's their place. But this is my home and my property. And in the same way, a beehive isn't going to allow a murder hornet into their house. Well, I'm not going to allow them into my house, is the way it kind of works. So, those are the updates on the Honey Milk Ranch. Let me go into the chat for a little bit, because I always miss talking to you guys. Cool. Let that catch up. All right. I'm a little bit distracted because I just threw down some more seed. The lawn's coming in pretty good, but I've got an army of squirrels, and as soon as I throw down some seed, they come out and they fill up their little jaws with grass seed that I just planted. And I'm like, get. Now, if I go out there and just raise my voice, they'll run off. I don't need to take them out or anything. But they waited till I started my show today, and they know I can't get up and tell them to get. And I'm looking out my window, and they're running around, filling up their little jaws with grass seed that I just planted. Grass seed, I don't know if you know this, but grass seed can cost as much as $100 for a large bag of grass seed now. Everything's gone up in price. So they're literally eating dollars worth of grass seed. Well, I mean, I'm sure it's not a big deal. I guess I'm feeding the squirrel, but the squirrels also carry the ticks as well. So if you have an overpopulation of squirrels, then you're going to have ticks around as well. So, all right. Yeah, the squirrels and the birds, they have a purpose. They help reseed the forest. That's what their purpose is. And how do they do that? Well, they bury these seeds all over the landscape. That's how the forest stays very dense. Birds do the same thing, but with smaller seeds that they ingest and they poop out. And so the squirrels are responsible for the larger seeds like oak, acorns, and those kinds of things. And the birds are responsible for the smaller seeds. So God is good, isn't he? He's amazing. So you need the squirrels. If you have a forest that's devoid of squirrels, you're not going to have as much growth in the forest. And the forest will not be able to spread, because that's how forests spread as well. Now, obviously, acorns fall off the tree, but what squirrels do is they actually bury these acorns so that they can pick them up in the winter when their food is scarce. They know exactly where they buried everything. So it kind of basically plants the acorn, because when they go back to eat the acorns, they can't find all of them, every single one. So the ones that they missed end up growing into new trees and new forest. So everything has a purpose, except for a diseased tick. I can't imagine that it has a purpose for anything. But anyway, you guys, I love each and every one of you. And Blue Watt says, what are wasps good for? Well, apparently they're pollinators as well. So when there's no bees around, the wasps actually pollinate as well as bumblebees. No bird baths yet. There's so much to do, you guys. I mean, there's a million things I could do. I could have started a garden this year and done a lot of things, but I've just been so busy lately. There's just no time in the day. So at some point we'll do all that. I mean, there's plenty of time to do all that, and I'll involve you guys in all those new projects. So that'll be fun. Yeah. I can't wait to get my garage enclosed, because I've got like field mice that go in there and they make nests everywhere. I went to go pull out my my boots for my my wading boots, and a mouse had built a nest in my shoe, in my boot, and was chewing my boot and destroying it. And I was like, dang it. So I emptied the nest out and I put a little patch on the shoe inside. It was in the inside part. But anything that's out there exposed to the elements, you know, the mice have endless, food source out here, because they eat acorns too. And so inside the shoe was some broken up acorns, some half-eaten acorns, and a nest. I was like, oh boy. So rodent control is important, or you have to keep everything locked tight so they can't get in, or bring in anything, any boxes or anything that you don't want anything destroyed in. So I've been doing that, you know, but you got to make sure there's nothing in the box when you bring it in the house, because you'll bring it right in the house with you. So I got most of the stuff out of the garage, but I need to get that garage framed in and put the doors on so that it's a real garage, so I can actually store stuff in there without having to worry about that. Layla asks, how big are your boots? I wear size 13. These are wading boots. They're like wading shoes. You basically put your waders on, you put the shoes on outside of that. So, and I haven't used them in a while. I want to get back out there and fish, but there's just no time. There's just no time. Also, it's tick season, so you don't want to be walking around in tall grass too much, even if you protect yourself. The seed ticks come out that you can barely see. So, all right, you guys, well, I'll let you go. We'll be back tomorrow with more stuff. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Take care and be safe, everybody.